All right, mathletes, here's matrices application. So what we're going to do is be solving systems of equations with three variables and using matrices to help us do that, and using reduced row echelon form, or also known as Gaussian method, to do so. So first thing we want to do with these is always allocate our variables. So our variables need to be things that we can control. In this scenario, we have Joe has $10,000 to invest. As his financial consultant, you recommend that he invests in treasury bills that yield 6%. So one of our variables is how much he's going to invest in treasury bills. Treasury bonds, let's let that equal a second variable. And corporate bonds that yield 8%. Joe wants to have an annual income of $680 with his investments. And he also wants to make sure the amount invested in corporate bonds must be half that invested in treasury bills. Find the amount in each investment. So if we have three variables, we need to come up with three equations. First equation is going to come up with this. So if he has that much amount of money to invest, x plus y plus z needs to be equal to 10,000. Okay. The second piece of information is the fact that how much money he's going to get from each bond and how much he needs to make. So for treasury bills, that was our x, he's going to make 6% plus what he's going to make in treasury bonds, that's 7%, and what he's going to make in corporate bonds, that's 8%. We know that that percentage needs to add up to what he makes annually, which is $680. Okay, so then from this, he wants to consider, there's one other piece of information. We know we need three equations, and it's that the amount invested in corporate bonds must be half that invested in treasury bills. So if I write that equation, I'm going to get that z is going to be equal to 1/2 of x. Well, I need to make sure it's in this form when I have x's and y's on one side and constants on the other. So if I multiply both sides by 2, I get this, and I can do 0 is equal to x minus 2z. So put this over here, I get 1x plus 0y minus 2z is equal to 0. So there I have my three equations. So now I'm going to use matrices to help us solve this. So I'm going to pull out my calculator, and I want to input this into an augmented matrix. This augmented matrix is going to be 1, 1, 1, 1,000. Then it's going to be 0.06, 0.07, 0.08, and 680. And the last one's going to be 1, 0, -2, and 0 for our augmented matrix. So just taking our coefficients from our equations. So I'm going to input that in my calculator. So that's second matrix, and I want to edit, and I go over to edit and I hit enter. Well, I want this to be a 3×4, so I hit enter, and I already have my values typed in here. 1, 1, 1, 10,000, then 0.06, 0.07. Let's go ahead and pause the video and make sure you got those into your calculator as you were working this along with us. So after you have them into your calculator, go ahead and hit quit, and we want to do the reduced row echelon form. So we can do second matrix, and I want to go to math, and I want to use that math and calculate the reduced row echelon. If you remember from the other day, that is our B. Hit enter. Tell it what matrix we want to do it of, and that's matrix 1. Okay, I'm going to close that out and hit enter. And as I can see, I'm going to get my solutions here. So I know that my X is equal to $4,000 to invest there, in Treasury bills. My Y is going to be 4,000 Treasury bonds, and my Z is equal to my corporate bonds, which is going to be 2,000. All right, so that's one type of equation that we're going to be dealing with. Another application type is if we have 3 points, 1, 2, 3, and we want to solve for a quadratic equation. So to do so, again, we need to get 3 equations. Well, the nice thing is we can use this and each adjoining equation because we have y's and x's, and we'll be left with a, b, and c. So I plug in -2, and I know I'm going to get a y of -4. So I'm going to do a, my x had to be -2 squared, plus b, my x was -2, plus c. So I just plugged in my x's and y's into this equation for the first point. Second point, I can do the same thing. My y is -1, which is equal to a times 1 squared plus b times 1 plus c. And my third piece, my y is -19. That's going to be equal to a 3 squared plus b times 3 plus c. So if I try and get this simplified and into my augmented matrix, I'm going to have -2 squared is 4, -2, 1. And that's got to be equal to -4. For my second equation, I'm just going to have 1, 1, 1, and that's going to be equal to -1. And then 3 squared is going to be 9, 3b, and c. I have 1c again. That's going to be equal to -19. So there's my augmented matrix. So go ahead, pull out your calculator, and we're going to do second matrix. I'm this time going to put it into, I'm going to leave that one in the first one, go to 2, and start this. So I do a 3 by 4, and my matrix is 4, -2, 1, and -4. That's my y. And I had 1, 1, 1, and -1. That's my y. And my third point gave me 9, 3, 1, and -19. Okay. And I have that there. So now that I have my matrix C in, I'm going to do the similar thing. I'm going to do second enter to pull up that before, but I don't want to do a matrix A this time. I'm going to do it matrix B. So I'm just going to change that to matrix B. And I'm going to hit enter. And I should find out what my A, B, and C values are of this function to make sure it's satisfied by these 3 points. So my A is equal to -2, my B is equal to -1, and my C is equal to 2. Therefore, I get a y equals -2x squared minus x plus 2 is going to satisfy all 3 of those points. Okay, let's look at our last example here. So, a dietitian at a general hospital wants a patient to have a meal that has 47 grams of protein, 58 grams of carbohydrates, and 630 milligrams of calcium. The hospital food service tells the dietitian that the dinner for today is pork chops, corn on the cob, and 2% milk. Each serving of the pork chop has 23 grams of protein, 0 grams of carbs, and 10 milligrams of calcium. Each serving of corn on the cob contains 3 grams of protein, 16 grams of carbohydrates, and 10 milligrams of calcium. Each glass of 2% milk contains 9 grams of protein, 13 grams of carbohydrates, and 300 milligrams of calcium. How many servings of each food should the dietitian provide for the patient? So we should understand we have 3 variables. It's what we can control. So the first thing we can control is how many pork chops the patient is given. The second thing we can control is how much corn on the cob that patient can get. And our third thing is how many servings of milk that patient can receive. So now that I've delegated my variables, I want to try and decide on equations. So my equations are going to come from the nutrients. So I'm going to have one equation that deals with the nutrients for, I'll call it my protein equation. I'm going to have one for my carbohydrates, and then one for my calcium. Okay, so my protein equation. My protein equation is going to be using the things that I know about protein. So they must have 47 total grams of protein. And I know from the pork chop, they are going to get 23 grams of protein. From the corn, that's my Y variable, the corn is going to be 3 grams of protein. And then my last thing is how many grams of protein the milk contains, and that's there, plus 9 of my milk. Okay, my next equation is going to be equation for carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, patient should get 58 grams of carbohydrates. Again, how much comes from the pork chops? And I get 0 carbs from my pork chops. And I'm sorry, from my corn. So that's 0 carbs from my pork. And then how much do I get from my corn? I should get 16 carbohydrates from my corn. Plus, how much do I get from my milk? Well, I get 13 grams of carbohydrates for my milk. Last thing is my calcium intake. So calcium intake is in milligrams. I gotta get 630. Okay. So how much do I get from my pork chops? I get 10 milligrams. So I get 10x. Plus, how much do I get from my corn? Well, I'm gonna get 10 again from my corn. Okay. And the third piece is how much calcium I get from my milk. Well, that's a big whopper. We all know milk's rich in calcium, and that's 300 milligrams for my milk. So now that I've set up my 3 systems of equations, I'm going to try and write out my augmented matrix. So I'm going to have 23, 3, 9, augmented to 47. I'm going to have 0, 16, 13, 58, and I'm going to have 10, 10, 300, 300, 630. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull out my calculator and pause the video here and give you guys a second to type that in. So after I put my matrix in matrix C, so after you've inputted your augmented matrix over here, go ahead and do a reduced row echelon form. So I'm going to quit out of this. Hit second enter, pull up what I hit last, but this time I want to do it of matrix C. So I hit second matrix, go to C, and then enter. And if things come out, I can see that I should have 1 serving of pork chops. I should have 2 servings of corn and 2 servings of milk to make sure my patient gets what they need. All right, go ahead and highlight questions. We'll be working on some group problems and application problems in class tomorrow.